Hi, this is Mark Blakely presenting my Module 16 case study on Internet use violations, threats over the World Wide Web. First, I'm going to identify and analyze the problems of this case study. I'm going to begin by introducing the facts that I know. These are the individuals involved in the case study. Dr. Harvey Smith is a well-regarded principal at Slattery Stano High School. He's been the educational leader at this school for the past 9 years, as well liked by all the students and parents. Miss Robin Tate is in her second year of teaching in this school. William Hall is a particular student that Miss Tate makes accusations towards. And this case study also mentions that there are many upset parents, students in the school over Miss Tate's teaching philosophies. And as mentioned already, the case study takes place at Slattery Stano High School, which sits in an affluent neighborhood resided by many professionals like doctors, lawyers, and investors. And those students who attend this high school are privileged with the nicest clothes and the newest technologies. Adding to what I already know, Mr. Smith hired Miss Tate to teach advanced science classes in the high school. She teaches zoology, botany, and genetics. Miss Tate is a well-educated individual. She has her master's degree. She has some post-grad work before even having her first year of teaching. But she is portrayed as having a rigorous class expectations by her students and their parents, where a high workload, stress, poor instruction are the main complaints. Mr. Smith has recognized that Miss Tate's weaknesses and has offered suggestions to reduce the stress in the classroom and building positive relationships with their students. However, Miss Tate did not follow through on those suggestions. In the fall, Miss Tate's second year of teaching, she received an anonymous online message with a link to a Facebook page that had vulgar comments about her teaching and had a threat about making Miss Tate disappear. Information that I would like to know: why is Miss Tate unsuccessful in connecting with her students? Is it Miss Tate, or are the students and their socioeconomic background playing a role in this? Are Miss Tate's expectations really too high, or are the parents upset because their child isn't earning an A? I think many times today, many parents simply expect their kids to come to school and leave with an A without working hard or earning the grade. So are their complaints justified? Which specific students and parents are making the complaints? Is it a select few, or all the students and parents complaining? And in my opinion, the two most important questions in this case study are who set up the Facebook page and who's responsible for making the threat. The case study leads me to believe that a single person is responsible for all the issues here, but I'm not necessarily buying into that. So what are the main problems here? 1, Mrs. Tate has been threatened. 2, Miss Tate is obviously struggling at building relationships with her students. And 3, Miss Tate is very quick to accuse William Hall of creating the Facebook page and making the threat. Now that we've identified all the facts, I'm going to move on to proposing a plan. So, as an administrator, I would need to first reassure Miss Tate of her safety. Though I think there's an obvious threat presented here, I'm not convinced that the threat is serious in nature. I think Miss Tate may have jumped to conclusions, but at any rate, I would need to assume the threat is real. Therefore, I would probably immediately ask the technology department to get involved and investigate the site creator if they could, see if they could find out who sent the initial message to her. I would also follow up with Miss Tate's hunch that William Hall is involved by individually interviewing him with the assumption that he is innocent. Even if he is not involved, his classroom comments need to be addressed. That's definitely something I would have to meet with him to talk about. Though determining the culprit would be my first concern, I would start planning an evaluation process of Miss Tate's teaching and course design, though I don't think this part of the plan would start the first day Miss Tate returned to school. So in order to implement my plan, I would need to meet with Miss Tate immediately Monday morning to collect any of the missing facts and discuss the incident further with her. At this time, I could make more of an analysis of the seriousness of the threat and determine if there needs to be any extra steps in ensuring Miss Tate's safety. I would ask, again, if the IT department could get involved as well as the local police. I'm guessing the police would need to be involved in obtaining an IP address so they could link the messages in the Facebook page. But I would also like the police to be involved in the case, especially if the culprit's not a student. The next part of the implementation that I would like to do is schedule a meeting with William Hall and ask about his comments in class and why he feels the way he does. And if he's not the one making the threats, maybe he has information about the one who is. I would then meet with or conduct surveys with Ms. Tate's classes to see if I could gain further insight on the incident and her teaching methods. And lastly, I would begin scheduling informal evaluations of Ms. Tate's teaching and her courses, setting professional goals as needed. So now I'm going to move on to category 3, resolving the issues. We need to keep in mind while resolving the issue, what's best for students. Following that logic, I think ensuring a safe, productive learning environment for all students and teachers becomes priority number 1. Whether or not a student made a threat or created the page makes no difference to me. As the administrator, I now know that there are upset students and parents. So I need to get to the root of the problem so that students can focus on learning. Going along with that, I need to make sure that I'm supporting Ms. Tate in being the most effective teacher that she can be. Without investigating her teaching personally, it's hard to say that she's even doing anything wrong at this point. But if there is, I need to guide her in growing professionally. If parents and students are overreacting to Ms. Tate's teaching, then there needs to be some kind of communication about the high expectations of her classes and how it's going to benefit the students in the long run. I also need to make sure that my educators and teaching are teaching what it is to be a good digital citizen. Writing anonymous messages and associating with web pages that allow threats are not in the best interest of the students, and I need to make sure that that's being taught. And the final part of the resolution is dealing with the perpetrator effectively. Although this may be a prank, it's still a threat, and the students and parents need to know that the school will not tolerate any type of bullying. If there's no consequences to the person involved in this incident, I'd imagine that this won't be the only time I'm going to be dealing with something like this. So the problem resolution. For the perpetrator, board policy should set the consequences for a student who violated these rules. If it's a parent to be found that made the threats, then I think the local police department should definitely be involved in pressing charges to the highest degree for that offense. As for Ms. Tate, I believe it's pretty apparent that her teaching and her course rigor need to be evaluated, and she should take Mr. Smith's suggestions a little bit more serious. I also feel that Mr. Smith is somewhat responsible for the situation, as he knew about Ms. Tate's teaching deficiencies prior to this event. But it doesn't sound like he followed up to see if she took his teaching strategies. So had he had done this before, the problem at hand might not even exist. So he definitely needs to follow up with her on this now. All right, moving on to category 4 by debriefing and providing some reflections on my thoughts, feelings, and values. While reading through the case study, I immediately started picturing a school filled with students who can do no wrong by their parents. These students come from homes where their parents had plenty of money and power. So I thought that these are the types of students that are very privileged. Knowing this, I started to wonder if the student and parent complaints were really justified. Is Miss Tate really a poor teacher, or are the students and their parents just upset because the classes are too difficult to earn an A in? I also wonder if Miss Tate is in real danger or not. The words "who wants Miss Tate to disappear" doesn't necessarily mean that someone's going to hurt her, but as a school administrator, I wouldn't want to be liable for something that I took too lightly when it turned out to be a more serious issue. Moving on to my feelings. I do feel sorry for Miss Tate. It's easy to be it's not easy being a new teacher, especially in a high school where students are only a few years younger than you. I'm also a bit aggravated with Mr. Smith. If he already knew Miss Tate was struggling with things in her classroom, then why wasn't he offering her more support? I'm also ashamed for whoever made the threat to Miss Tate. They obviously have some growing up to do, and they need to learn a different way to approach their differences. I also feel that this whole situation was preventable. Again, if Miss Tate was struggling with her students, then Mr. Smith should have been supporting her in that area. After reading the case study, I definitely value safety. With all the hateful and harmful things we hear about today, more of it seems to be creeping into our schools. And I think we've taken for granted how safe our schools are. I think we're starting to find out how unsafe our schools can be. I also value building rapport with students. I always take a lot of pride in building relationships with my students. In this case study just kind of shows how important that can be. Student, parent, and administrative support is another thing I value. I think teaching would be a pretty difficult job to perform if you aren't supported by those around you. And lastly, I value the IT department, as I think they would be a key factor in finding out who committed this offense. It's very easy for people nowadays to sit behind a computer and say hurtful things and get away with it. So I'm glad that we have avenues to use if we ever need to find that person. So here are the unresolved issues. Who's guilty of creating the Facebook page and writing the thread? How will the perpetrator be dealt with? Are digital citizenship concepts or other ethical and moral teachings taking place in the school to help prevent future incidents from happening? And what steps are being taken to help Ms. Tate grow professionally? Category 5, reflecting on Standard 5 and how I demonstrated the success of every student with integrity, fairness, and ethical manner. Starting with integrity, I investigated the facts of this case with an open mind, withholding Ms. Tate's accusations of William Hall. I made sure that my number one priority is keeping the students and staff safe. And I made it a priority to help Ms. Tate grow as a professional, which is going to benefit everyone in this case. I displayed fairness by not jumping to conclusions. Even with Ms. Tate's strong allegation of William Hall, I made sure that I listened to all parties involved to get as many facts about the incident and Ms. Tate's teaching practices, and I followed school policy regarding this incident. Lastly, looking at how I displayed my actions in an ethical manner, I made sure that safety of everyone was the utmost priority while trying to resolve the issue. I offered Ms. Tate support emotionally and professionally, and I followed through on the consequences of the violator to show that the school takes these threats successfully. Thanks for watching my presentation. Have a great rest of the summer.